Good morning, everyone. The time is 8:30. I will call this meeting to order. Do we have any excused absences? Pardon me? Okay. Director Butler. We don't need a motion to approve that, do we? We do, I'm sorry. Okay. There we go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any conflicts of interest on agenda items? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to public comment on agenda items. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and residence for the record. Thank you.
Hi, Ted Hartzell. I live in Brentwood. I'm representing Together West Michigan.
There you go.
I'm on the housing team for Together West Michigan. I just have want to point out a discrepancy in for the Fulton and Market transformational Brownfield plan. The memorandum from Christian Borg of the Economic Development Department quotes a figure, but quotes it inaccurately, and it's an important distinction. This document quotes the Bowen National Research hired by Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce as saying that, where is this? He says the greatest need for, speaking of rental units needed in Grand Rapids, the projection from 2022 through 2027 says that based on current estimates, all of the units will be rented to households earning at or below 150% of the area median income. According to the Housing Needs Assessment, that's the Chamber of Commerce sponsored study by Bowen National. According to the Housing Needs Assessment, the need for rental housing in this price range represents the highest housing gap across the city of Grand Rapids. Actually, and he quotes the HNA estimates a total of 2,300 units in this price range will be needed by 2027 to keep up with demand. And actually, the 2,300 refers to units that are 120% AMI and below, not 150 AMI, which is an important distinction. And in tallying up Bowen's own research, you'll find the statistics on for Bowen National Research on the executive summary, section 2, page 10. So we wanted to note that this is, quite a difference between the 150% or under 120%. And the under 120% AMI for rental needs in Grand Rapids accounts for 71% of the total of 7,951, according to the Bowen research. So just wanted to make that distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Hartzell. Any other public comment on agenda items? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to minutes approval. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion or edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our next item is a review of our interim financial statements as of September 30, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Support.
Tricia?
Hello, good morning. All right, Jess, help me.
Sorry.
Which,
Try not to drop my computer. How do I just use that? Yeah.
perfect. All right, sorry about that. The statements in your packet are as of September 30. beginning this is your first set of statements for this fiscal year. As I've been going around to the various authorities, I've just been kind of doing a little run through of the financial statements in a little bit more depth, kind of just an overview of how to read them as board members change and stuff. I kind of thought maybe doing that once a year would probably not be a bad idea. So bear with me. I'm going to take a little bit longer, but I promise I won't take forever for those of you who look at financial statements all the time. Your Statement A is your balance sheet, showing your assets, liabilities, and fund balance or equity, same as what you would see in like a private company. Because we're a governmental fund, a lot of things we show as a reserve for fund balance, which means that we've said this is how we're going to spend our money, this is what we're holding it for, but it's not technically a liability yet, as far as a GAAP or general accepted accounting principles doesn't make it a liability. And like on the revolving fund, you'll see like the 3.5 million or the 300,000 for the approved project grants or the ESA grants. Those are things that we have said we were going to pay, but they're not technically owed yet. So that's why we hold those in reserve. You can see your assets minus your liabilities equals your fund equity, or your liabilities and equity balance to your assets. And also we'll notice that the total fund equity, the 26.8 million, if you go to the next statement, in the very bottom right-hand corner is your ending fund balance for the combined funds on your statement of revenues and expenditures. This shows all your revenues and expenditures throughout the year. Down at the bottom, we start with your beginning fund balance, so where you ended last year, and then the results of where we're going. So are we more revenue, more expense? Are we increasing or decreasing fund balance? How are things going? There is one difference I want to point out. If you take, look at the Brownfield operating fund, in FY24, we ended with 2.9, I need to look at it on my paper because I can't see it on the, 2.918. You'll notice that the beginning fund balance in the FY25 column is slightly different. That is adjusted for compensated absences. If I go back, if you remember in the past, compensated absences were shown as a reserve. There was a change to the GASB made a change in compensated absences, so now we have to show those as a liability. Really nothing changes. You know, you're going to pay your people their sick and vacation time, well, no matter where it is on your statement here. Statement B1 is unique to the Brownfield. Just it breaks out all of the revenues coming in. There were no reimbursements done yet. I believe Christian will get those through in the next day or two. So those will come through and get paid to all the developers. But you can see how all the revenues come in, what it was budgeted at. There is a slight difference. There's a force figure down there. At the time when we budget, we don't necessarily know what the budget for each individual project will be, so the Economic Development Department makes their very best guess at a very overarching, lots of moving parts, and comes up with a number. And then once the Board of Review goes through and we have those values, we're able to budget each individual project. And so that force figure there is just showing you that, you know, we were off when we budgeted this big giant pot all together. Statement C is your schedule of expenditures. Since this is the first statement of the year, your total expenses equal what is your total expenses on Statement B, other than like $1 for rounding. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Tricia? Mr. Treasurer, any comment?
I would just comment to our newer board members and the community that we are fortunate here in Grand Rapids to have such a great staff that manages what is a very strong and sound financial position for our organization. It's something that we are very proud of, and just like to commend staff. One question is the status of the audit.
Sure. The auditors were on site for about 4 weeks, shortly after Labor Day. This last couple of weeks, they have been off-site. I have seen a few drafts of some of the authority statements, not the Brownfields yet. So they're coming through, they're working through their committees that they need to go through. As far as I'm aware, in conversations with the comptroller's office, the full city audit and all of the authorities that go along with it, we're on schedule, and typically we would get those back mid-December. So.
Okay, thank you. One additional question, if we could go back one page.
Sure.
One more, I'm sorry, just to the, yes, here we are. On the prior year adjustments, just quickly comment on those, please.
That's the compensated absences, the difference between if you take the math, the difference between 2,918,863 and 2,865,632, that is 53,231, which is the amount of your compensated absences that was moved from a reserve of your fund equity to a liability.
So if I'm looking at the second line item on the prior year adjustments.
I'm so sorry.
yeah.
Prior year adjustments.
Yeah.
Those are any like tax appeals or anything like that. We always budget for some because they happen. But we can't always, we can't know who's going to appeal or how the appeal's going to go or which way. So we tend to budget conservatively and budget that as a negative. Every now and then, in some years, you'll notice that line item will actually come through as a positive. As of right now, obviously, since taxes were just posted, there haven't been any changes for prior years yet at this point. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
No, no worries. Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Tricia, thank you for making this easy for us as usual. We have a motion to approve on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now moving to our action items. Our first item is a resolution approving an Act 381 work plan and development and reimbursement agreement for the Southtown Lofts redevelopment project located at 640 Eastern Avenue. Do I have a motion to approve?
Support.
Jess?
All right, good morning. So this project first came before you at your July meeting. And just a quick overview of the details. So the project will include the demolition of the existing structurally compromised building and the construction of a new mixed-use building with 12 apartments and then ground floor commercial and retail. The project is seeking traditional brownfield activities for reimbursement totaling $606,000, and total investment in the project is $4.7 million. Just as a reminder, you guys also approved a emerging developer grant for this project in the amount of $165,000. And the city is also supporting this project with a $2 million RAP grant as well as a 15-year neighborhood enterprise zone. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Jess?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thanks, Jess. Not so much a question about this individual project, and I see we have some of the folks with the development here as well. But I just had a question. I know we talked about the emergency developer grant. We had one last time. Is there a document or somewhere I'm missing where we could have, those that have received this emerging developer grant, and then as, they move forward, usually you'll say, okay, we expect that there might be, they might be going after this next type of reimbursement we have. So is there a document that kind of shows that, just an overall, all of the investments that different projects might have?
We can generate a report. We've never done that, but we'd happy to do that. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I think just, after the last meeting and then the developer that was there, I don't want to say they're similar projects, but, these emerging developers and kind of just showing the breadth of the development that's happening across the city. Sometimes I think what might be the headline is the really large dollar amount or the really large number of unit amount. But there are significant investments that we're making in emerging developers, and I just want to be able to share that story, more broadly in this body as well.
Absolutely. Yep,
you.
we can work on that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sassi. I also think, too, just understanding where these projects are happening, right, in relation to the city, and, to understand that we're putting a thoughtful effort into directing funds into historically underserved parts of the city, I think, speaks well to the momentum that we have going here. So, thank you. Okay, no further discussion. We have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our next item is a resolution approving an Act 381 work plan and development and reimbursement agreement for the Talbot Bridge LLC redevelopment project located at 648 Bridge Street Northwest and 345 Lexington Avenue Northwest. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Jess?
All right. So this next project was before you back at your August meeting. It also includes the demolition of an existing building, which was the former Duttler's grocery store. The plan is to construct a new mixed-use building with 148 apartments and then ground floor retail. The project is also seeking reimbursement for traditional activities that amount to $3.6 million. And total investment in the project is estimated at $30 million. The city is also considering a request for a 15-year neighborhood enterprise zone in partnership with this Brownfield plan as well. Any questions?
Any questions for Jess? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our last action item is a resolution approving a transformational brownfield plan for the Fulton and Market redevelopment project. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Support.
Morning, Sarah.
Good morning. I am pretty ecstatic to be here and humbled to serve in this capacity at the city where I get an opportunity like this to talk to all of you about a really exciting project that's been in the works for a while. I actually worked on it in some capacity at my old job at the MEDC, and so again, very excited to be able to tell you a little bit more about Fulton and Market. And this is obviously building on the overview from last month. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you a presentation and then invite Joe up with Michigan Growth Advisors to follow up on some of the questions that you posed at the last meeting. And then we're happy to field questions as we need at the end. Okay? And actually, before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to Jess Solis, who has been very critical in this review and helping me navigate just the processes at the city. And so I just really appreciate her help and dedication to the office. Okay. Can I just click it? What's going on? Okay, I got it. Yep, thanks. All right, so just to recap, the project overview here, this is 6.8 acres of redevelopment along the river, 3 high-rise towers including office, residential, and hotel, 671 units between a mix of condos and apartments, almost $800 million in investment, more than we've ever seen in downtown. Just to give you context, the last big project of scale would be Studio Park, and that was about $187 million. Just to give you, the picture, that's including their most recent investment there with their residential tower. 2,500 parking spots. That's going to be a mix between the buildings, of course, and then 941 full-time jobs, again, blended between the 3 towers. This is the site. I'm hoping this all looks familiar. This is 10 parcels, again, along our beautiful Grand River on the west there, bounded by Fulton at the north, Market at the east, and 131 on the south. From the presentation that we had last month, you'll remember that Weston actually is meant to continue into the river, so we have that promenade that will help extend accessibility for the site. This is a reminder of the transformational brownfield plan. I know that I went over this also last month, and I just really want to call some attention to that column on the right. It's really the showing you the difference between traditional brownfield TIF and what we're talking about today. This is mainly capturing different eligible costs. And so under a traditional TIF, we have demo, lead and asbestos abatement, site prep, public infrastructure. Today's consideration is really all about the vertical construction. That is an eligible activity under transformational brownfield plans. And then the other big thing to note here with an enhanced incentive like this is that there's 4 additional revenue streams. So a total of 5 revenue streams. One are property taxes, state and local, and then we've got income tax, we've got sales and use tax, withholding tax, and I think that's it. So those are the main differences: eligible activities and revenue streams. So these next 6 slides are going to talk a little bit about the tower, each of the towers, as well as the incentives that make up each building, right? So this first one is the office tower, which we expect to go into construction fall of next year. $275 million in development costs, a 21-story building with 13 stories dedicated to a single office user, 21,000 square feet of retail on the first floor, 1,700 jobs, and parking included on 8 of those 21 stories. The incentive breakdown as it relates to the office tower is quite substantial. The incentives derive from the state transformational brownfield plan revenue streams is everything not in the red box. And so your consideration today is really focused on the red box of being local property tax capture. And then you can notice the leverage there that really, your consideration today is really setting the table for a consideration at some point, hopefully, by the state, and just a tremendous amount of investment here that we're considering. I want to just reiterate a couple of things there on the right side. One is that those incentives at the state level are only a 20-year period, right? So versus our 30-year period that we traditionally see under Brownfield TIF, we've got 20 years of capture for those additional revenue streams. And we also, if this is not realized, none of this will be reimbursed, right? So it's very much a reimbursement-based program. That's how the nature of tax increment financing and how that works. And so I just want to call some attention to that. The second tower is the residential tower. Both the residential and hotel are anticipated to start construction in the summer of '26. In the residential tower, we've got $329 million in development costs, 668,320 square feet, and a 43-story building, which I believe would be the tallest building in downtown Grand Rapids. This is a blend of studio 1 and 2 and 3 bedrooms up to 595 residential apartments, ranging from 2,600 to 3,900. And this does align with 150% AMI. The gentleman that commented earlier is correct. We were definitely looking at the housing needs assessment from '22. and took some liberties with the column or the row that's really dedicated to this being the highest need for the needs assessment when it comes to rental in downtown Grand Rapids. It's specified in the assessment as 121% plus, and so we felt that the 150 made sense in that category and are calling that out, as you saw in the memo. 1,700 square feet of retail, 61 jobs, and the parking podium being dedicated both to the hotel, to be shared with the hotel tower as well. The residential tower incentive breakdown, again, calling your attention to the red box there of local property tax capture of 32 million, and also some attention to the neighborhood enterprise zone exemption at the bottom there, which we anticipate at some point evaluating. It's shown here because it's been requested. At the present time, we don't have enough information to really evaluate that request, but we view that as a great opportunity to refine numbers as we have more information, including and not limited to even the inclusion plan and some of the data that we'll see there in a second. Just reiterate the couple of things I mentioned on the office tower incentive breakdown, that again, these are performance-based reimbursements as the project is constructed, and those reimbursements are limited based on the time of the term between the 20 and 30-year tax capture periods. The final tower is dedicated to the hotel and condo tower, again constructed, anticipated in summer of '26. This is $194 million development costs, 406,000 square feet, 27-story building, 130 hotel keys, as well as 76 owner-occupied condos. These condos, when you're looking at the housing needs assessment, are the second highest need in that batch for the downtown, with the first being dedicated to 81 to 120% AMI, so for sale. So just to give you, again, larger context about what we're talking about here. I wanted to mention what that means. So that means, again, according to the Housing Needs Assessment of 22, that these are condos that are north of 358,000. We've got parking as part of the 27-story building, 6 stories of parking with 490 dedicated spots. And then we've got jobs, of course, 155 jobs dedicated to the building. The incentive breakdown here, again, calling your attention to the red box, and just the significant leverage here. Again, calling attention to the commercial redevelopment abatement there at the bottom. Not an ask today. We recognize that as part of the ask in the future, and wanted to just represent it here to be transparent about that. So this final slide is really an overview of the last 6 slides that I mentioned with the 3 different towers and the incentive breakdowns accordingly. We've got the red box, $129 million, a local property tax capture that's really the consideration before you today, leveraging that larger amount, which I would call attention to the bottom right number. So we've got the traditional Brownfield plan requirements there to give you a sense of how this project really meets the program requirements. And so the maximum reimbursable amount there is $565 million. And it's different in that we've got those local abatements included in the bigger table there at the bottom. So yes. That's all I wanted to say. Actually, no, I wanted to say one more thing. I know I keep hammering the leverage, but I really feel like we cannot talk about it enough. This is really a state incentive, right? But we're being benefited potentially here by state investment. And if you looked at the percentage split here, it's about a fifth local and 4/5 that would be eventually considered by the Michigan Strategic Fund Board. The inclusion plan. You, of course, know that we have this program that we started in 2021 and really are viewing not as a checkbox program, trying to set up developers for success at goals that they're setting that they can meet. The numbers here representing 4.7% on the construction side, about 1% on the professional services side, have an opportunity to be refined. We don't have a development partner and general contractor yet identified, and so I think that there's an opportunity here to refine this further, and I would just, I just want to call some attention to that there's some movement there. This last, I've got two more slides. So this slide is dedicated to the overall piece of that 129 million in the bottom right number, really dedicated to the local consideration for today. I think there's no doubt that this project would bolster more business in the community, encourage investment by other entrepreneurs in and around this site, and have a ripple effect similar to what we saw with the amphitheater project back in April, is just more investment into the downtown. And so just, again, excited about the opportunity here. These are the next steps that we've identified. Of course, some important hurdles with commission. We've got a public hearing coming up on the November 12th, and then consideration by the Michigan Strategic Fund after the new year. There's a couple things I want to just acknowledge on this slide, being my final slide, is that this is a lot to absorb. I recognize the very high number of pages in your board packet, and so thank you for taking time to look at it. It's an incredible amount of incentive that we're asking for consideration today, and I just want to emphasize the risk to the city being really limited because of how the program is structured and being a reimbursement-based program. And if this is not realized, that, there's nothing lost. I want to call some attention to the Affordable Housing Fund because I did not put a slide in here on that, and I did that on purpose because that's one, I would just say that's a choice that the development team gets the opportunity to make. We have indications that this development team very much wants to take advantage of having an affordable housing fund agreement with the city on this, and they've suggested a number of $8.5 million contributed to that fund versus what we saw in 201, where we really went into that project negotiation with two different options, right? We talked about potentially having 20% of the units carved out on the 201 project or a contribution to the fund. In this case, we know that we would get more bang for our buck with dedicated dollars to a fund, and I think that because of some of the limited information just around our final developer here, we want to take some time and be thoughtful about what that agreement really should be as we're learning what, the route, if you will, on the 201 project. The final thing I wanted to call some attention to is the resolution. The resolution, you should have a handout in front of you. And I want to bring you to page 3. because there are a couple of things that we're working on in addition to economic development with other partner city departments that are not yet in final form. And so we've added a couple of contingencies to the resolution around a traffic study to get a better understanding of the impacts of Market Avenue. I would call some attention to Director Wells' comments at the last meeting around just the investment in Market and wanting to continue to keep that as pedestrian friendly as we can. And then also acknowledge that there's a very big opportunity with the river trail access here. And so I think that as, again, the design gets finalized and there's more information there, this just gives me a little comfort that everyone's willing to play nice in the sandbox and have conversations about how public access to the river trail really would complement this deal. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Joe, do you want to come on up and please share?
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, I'm going to stand behind you.
All right, sounds good. Hello again, everybody. Joe Augustinelli, Michigan Growth Advisors. We've been leading the TBP process here. Noticeable absence from our last presentation, Brad Thomas from Progressive AE, who's been leading to the design side, is in one of our community outreach meetings right now with the Heartside Business Association, which is at the same time. So you're stuck with me today. Apologies. But I think you're going to want to probably talk about the numbers anyways, which is more my world than Brad's. So there were two follow-up items from my recollection. If I miss anything, please, let me know. From our last meeting,
Yes.
I'm going to go back to a different picture here. The first was around public access. I think Director Wells had asked a number of questions around, wanting to better understand how we're planning for public access, I think was the question. Correct me if I'm off base. To Sarah's point, a really key design feature in this project is the public access along the river. Basically, the entirety of the site that's not covered by a building will be available to the public, open to the public at all times. The key piece of that would be the extension of Weston is not a street, that's a pedestrian promenade coming down to the river. We envision that being lined with ground floor retail shops and restaurants, and then essentially a public courtyard area there. I guess maybe Lions Square is a good comparable location. We see that as a point where, as the growing kind of sports and entertainment district develops around the downtown, where this is sort of the knuckle between Van Andel and the amphitheater, and we see this pedestrian promenade is really a gathering area for folks to go before shows, after shows, events, things like that, and really, in inviting the public down to the river in a way that just doesn't exist today, along with a continuation down to the river. The final design of the river trail system and entry and access from the water is we're a long ways from finalizing that. But the vision ultimately is that there will be a trail system subject to an easement with the city that allows for public access and maintenance of that. Where exactly does that go? Is it 10 feet from the water, 6 feet from the water? That's a detail that's going to need to get finalized as the final site plan is conceptualized and brought to fruition. But there's unquestionably a commitment from the development team that there will be public access. As noted in the resolution that's in front of you, there's an understanding with the development team that there will be an easement there to the city. Were there other questions around public access that I can address at all around that? I don't want to skip over anything. Okay.
I was curious about the crossing at Fulton as well.
Yeah, so as the trail crosses Fulton to the north, I mean, I think the current thought process is that's probably an at-grade crossing. I don't know logistically if you could do much else. That bridge isn't super high to go down and under. So I think the current thought is at grade there. Yep. The other, was any other, before I move on to the next topic on public access? No? Okay. There was some questions around sort of, if I recall correctly, sort of engagement with small businesses and how does this development sort of interact with the broader downtown business community. There's a lot of tangents you could go down in that, that question. I think unquestionably putting 1.2 million square feet of development on a surface parking lot is going to create a huge amount of traffic in terms of residential occupancy, office use during the day, which will be there supporting your existing downtown restaurants, where we all know lunch is the hardest time to make money in a restaurant business. So growing that office user by day component will be a huge add. In addition to the development itself, it's going to have 30 or 40,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space on it that we envision being occupied by, we don't really know yet. We're still 3 years out from occupying that space, but the hope is that this will be new restaurants, new food and beverage options, soft goods retail, potentially some services, and we see a big opportunity to partner with DGRI and the Downtown Development Authority, leveraging their business incubation grant to bring new businesses into the downtown. But again, we're talking about 2028, 2029 occupancy of that space. So, we're quite a ways away from, getting into any potential tenant outreach. But just by the sheer volume of what's happening here, we see a huge impact, a huge and positive impact on the downtown. So I think those were the follow-up questions that were out there. I'm happy to get into the weeds further on this or any other pieces of the project.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Joe, for coming back. I think one of the questions that I had following up to was, we had talked about the parking structure, kind of balancing out what were those needs. But then I wanted to ask, were there going to be any electric charging stations in that structure?
We're not at that level of design, but I would say I would be surprised if that isn't designed in. That's becoming more and more standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one of the follow-up questions that I had from the last meeting too was, obviously it's the surface parking lot, so it's not like there's a lot of greenery on this particular lot. But could you talk about some of that? Some of the green space and some of the things that you all are planning. I think that was one of my follow-up questions. And then thanks for talking about the outreach to businesses, can understand that time frame. These are probably more comments and not necessarily a question for you. I think, thanks, Sarah, for putting into perspective, what this project means and how we're trying to utilize state, federal, whatever sort of exists to be able to impact our community, as a city that relies on income tax and property tax. We are always working to try to, bring in different organizations and businesses, and to create that impact so that hopefully lunchtime isn't a slow time for individuals. We have a number of individuals who are coming for conferences, adding to this local economy. And as I'm talking to different business districts, I think particularly in my ward, is just wanting to see more of that movement from, they might be coming down here, maybe they are coming to work, but how do we connect them throughout the city? And I think I heard that, last time as well. So just wanted to continue to highlight that. I think that we need to think about these projects as not like an either or, but a both and how, it is in the word transformational. How can that have these other, maximizing of impacts into our other businesses or other parts? And how can we help people get to and from these areas throughout the city? So that's just more of a comment, but then my questions, yep. So thanks about the electric charging station. If you could talk about the green space a little bit too.
Green space, okay. So there's none right now. It's a big, ugly surface parking lot with some scrubby trees by the river. The idea is, whatever is not covered by, the necessary hardscape of sidewalks and trails and things like that will be green. Is it going to look exactly like this drawing we're looking at right now? I'm sure the design will change some. But the idea is, we need to add tree canopy where we can, plantings and return of native plantings that would be native to the Grand River corridor is sort of part of the vision, particularly as we reimagine the flood wall through there which is right now about 2/3 of the site, just a concrete wall, and about 1/3 is a little bit more natural, I think, stone and things like that. But how can we soften that while still providing flood protection? It becomes a great opportunity for greening the site as well. And so, that's, I would say, not just something that the team is thinking about, but integral to the designing of the site. Also then, greening the rooftops of all the parking structures become amenity space for the individual tenants that are there, and providing green roofs and plantings and things like that to minimize the heat island effect of the buildings and things like that is part of the design thinking. But I'll keep coming back to, we're kind of at a master plan stage right now. Sarah touched on it a little bit as well. The property owners are in the process of bringing in a national development firm to co-develop this with them. That while the property owners have done lots of big things, this isn't their core competency of building $700 million mixed-use buildings. So we're bringing in a partner that does that. We're in kind of the final stages of a RFP process right now. So, once that partner's on board, I'm sure they're going to have some opinions on, should the corners be round or square, and probably some more important details than that. But as we continue to work through the process, we just want to make sure we're stating publicly we're at a master plan level right now. But the scale and volume is really where the incentive becomes important, and so that's what really we're here to talk about today. And we don't really see the scale or volume changing through any of that process.
Great, thank you. I had one other question, Mr. Chair, really for Ms. Raniero. At the beginning of the meeting in our public comment, we heard a comment about the Housing Next study. And I just, I think when people come, if we can clarify whatever the record is, that's helpful.
Sure.
And I don't have the minutes from that, Chad. I didn't write it down very well, but I know on one of the pages, it did say the 150% AMI is the second highest gap.
For sale.
Right,
Yes.
okay. So
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify any of those
Thanks.
comments
Yeah,
about the data.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's two different points
Haven't
there.
memorized it all. I've
Yeah,
read
no,
it.
understood. I printed a cheat sheet here. So yes, for the rental piece, 121+%, which is being proposed in this project, is the biggest need in the 22 housing needs assessment for rental. For sale, the second biggest need are the condos that are being suggested in this deal,
Okay.
which is 121% plus. The first priority in the housing needs assessment is between 81 and 120, and so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Joe and Sarah. I think my question is regarding the value proposition of this build, and it's more so pertaining to really the identity. We've heard a lot about numbers and the cost of the build and so on and so forth, but just the identity of the hotel and condo tower. I think it was mentioned by you, Sarah, that you said that the units are going to be north of $320,000, if I'm correct?
That's the number in the housing needs assessment I'm referencing when I say the second greatest need.
Okay.
For the condo sales, it's north of that number.
North of that number. Well, yeah, for me, I just really want to understand is here we have 76 owner-occupied luxury condos. I just really want to know if what we're looking to achieve here is that luxury type of vibe here in these builds, or are we like wanting to more so hit certain metrics when it comes to like, affordability and so on and so forth of these units?
I can touch on that.
Okay.
So I think I understand your question. Yeah, you're speaking to the for sale condos in the hotel tower. So the vision here is these would be a luxury product that would be able to access the amenities that are part of a luxury hotel as well, which is a product that doesn't exist in the Grand Rapids market today.
When we say luxury, it can be very relative in different senses of the term. Are we talking about like highly opulent? Are we talking about somewhat mid luxury? Or like what's your understanding of that? Because I'm in real estate, so it's very relative when you think about that concept.
I'm not sure how to answer that question other than I think probably luxury is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Sure.
So probably everybody has a different definition of what that means. I think it's anticipated that these will be very nice condos. I'm not sure how to describe it any differently than that.
They're luxury.
Right.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Director Van Vossen?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Joe, for putting this together. It's truly an amazing project, for the city, and it's going to bring, an incredible opportunity for everyone. So as we think about more urban development, can you speak about the LEED certification of this building? As we think about building responsibly, what is the level of LEED that this project is thinking about achieving?
Yeah, so again, I'll go back to my comment. We're at a master plan level that what level of green certification to pursue is going to be a later conversation, and if you should pursue it while still building all the design features into it. The certification itself is very expensive. So I can say there's the vision is this will be a very energy efficient building, utilizing, likely getting to a LEED level of building. Whether or not it pursues LEED certification or some other green building certification instead is a decision that hasn't been made yet. But I can say that, the design thought process is that there would be
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your thought.
Okay. That there would be, green design features incorporated into the development.
And the only thing I wanted to just add to that is that that's representative in the plan that we have. So it's not noted that there's going to be a specific level, but the green features that you would look for are in the text in the transformational Brownfield plan.
Yeah, I just think it's a great opportunity for our city, to start moving, towards that, path, as we see other cities around the nation, building responsibly, So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Director Van Vossen?
Thanks. Had one original question, but I'm going to add a new one. Maybe before I get to my second, maybe you can walk through a little bit of the timeline of the process that you still have to go through.
Sure.
Which would include a very robust review of the Planning Commission, with which a lot of these aesthetic questions will probably be addressed. So maybe if you can talk about what's the process you're going to go through once you leave here, from the Brownfield transformational kind of incentive through the state, and then maybe just a quick, timeline on when you might submit, designs for site plan review and approval.
Okay.
And then I'll get to my second.
Oh, all right, good. I can only remember one thing at a time, so that's better. So when we talk about incentive process, and then we'll get to the planning process. So incentive-wise, if this board recommends approval today, as Sarah mentioned, we have a public hearing at City Commission on November 12th, and then the consideration is currently slated for, I believe, the December 3rd City Council meeting for final approval of the plan, which would then take us to the Michigan Strategic Fund Board at their February meeting as the current target. We'll see if we can hit that target as we're still working through all the final details with the MEDC. Once we're at that point, we will also at that point have our development partner on board. That's anticipated kind of first of the year-ish is probably a solid target. And then we're going to have some planning as a group to do together of, okay, what are we going to tweak? What's the master plan look like? What's the overall planning and phasing look like? And then, move then into construction and design development. And after you get through all of that, then we're into site plan approval. There's already been a lot of discussion. This is not my world, Brad Thomas's world. At Progressive and his team have been, I know, actively engaged with the city at a conceptual level, and the city's asking important questions of, all right, well, exactly how many parking spaces, and a lot of that is still driven by, a big driver here is our, the future office tenant and what exactly they're going to need when we're ready to move forward. And that's a question we can't answer standing here today, other than it's a lot, right? So I would anticipate site plan probably next summer, and then the goal is to be under construction around this time next year. But yes, to your point, the project obviously will need to comply with any and all zoning regulations, which includes this. The Grand River overlay, I believe, obligates this public access along the trail.
We have our planning director here.
Right. Could probably answer that question better than I can. It's not good when the spreadsheet guy starts talking about site plan.
I'll help you. I'll try to help you. Good morning, Commission. My name is Kristen Torkelson. I'm the planning director for the City of Grand Rapids. So this project, and in its conceptual state right now, I do not anticipate that it will be presented before the Planning Commission. However, there are a number of zoning requirements that are going to have to be adhered to, and city staff would ensure that those requirements are being met. For example, I heard the EV charging stations. The answer is actually yes. One space will be required for every 200 parking spaces within a structure. Green space requirements, for example, 30% of the site would need to be dedicated for green space. There's an urban open space requirement. So there's still some significant zoning requirements that are in place that have been adopted by the city and will be enforced through the zoning ordinance. At this point, based on the meetings I've had with Mr. Thomas, there's nothing that has been presented to date that causes me serious concerns in terms of the project not being able to meet the zoning. And so it's still on a good path from a site plan perspective.
Thank you for rescuing me.
All right, now let's go back to the numbers.
All right, I'm more comfortable in that space. Yeah, thank you.
And I guess just more for clarification, or at least just, from an awareness standpoint, you have three significant, components, each of which has a significant value and incentives tied to it.
Correct.
Which you're submitting for in total.
Correct.
So I just want to make clarification, you don't collect on the incentives or the capture if we build the office tower and it's occupied, but yet economy takes a turn and the next phases of the project aren't, developed for a period of outer. How do these, are we looking at this, we're looking at this, I think, from a perspective of one large amount that's receiving the transformational incentives. Mm-hmm. Each of those three are a little bit less than that, so they kind of add up to a larger total. So I guess I'm just trying to understand the process. If you start with the office tower, it's a $55 million, local capture. Mm-hmm. The next one was 30 and whatever else the other ones are. So.
Yeah, I think I'm tracking. So the incentive for the project is funded by the construction of the project. Right. So to the extent future phases are not constructed, then there is no incentive generated by those future phases, and therefore the project doesn't receive any incentive for the future phases. It would still receive the incentive for the phases that are constructed, which I'm not sure if, I think that was your question. Yeah.
If
So,
the is only built.
correct.
10 years later, the other residual properties, have yet to be constructed.
Correct.
The project will collect on the third of the.
The strongest market for this is not the office tower, it's the everything else. So I probably the flip of that would be a more likely but unlikely outcome. But yeah, the incentives, there would not, it's not currently envisioned that the incentive would have a circuit breaker if only 2/3 of the project was developed. The intent is to develop all of this at once, because it's all kind of integrated together. Any substantial change from the current plan will require an amendment to the TBP. That's a requirement of the MEDC through the Michigan Strategic Fund. If the project square footage of any component use changes downward by more than 15%, 10 or 15%, I don't have that number fresh in the top of my head, then we have to go through an amendment process, which would bring this back in front of this body, City Commission, and the MSF. So did I answer your question?
You did.
Hopefully.
I just wanted it more clear for the record.
Yes.
Every plan always has some kind of an amendment and gets brought back, at some point in time.
Yeah.
And so for future commissions, when, if there is ever a scenario with which you're starting to capture and we're starting to see reimbursement on one component of it, that there shouldn't be a surprise that there could be delays of that. And then it's.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I would also add, so we're working on 2 other transformational brownfield plans in the state in different communities right now, and the MEDC has consistently said to each one of our clients that we expect every TBP that comes through to have an amendment, just given the scale and complexity of these deals. We don't want to go through the amendment process. We hope this is, where the final design is, but we also realize we're talking about investment that's still years down the road and, and very large, and a 10% change seems like a minimal amount, but it's big when you're talking about buildings that are this big.
Thanks.
So, thank you.
Okay, well, Director Wells.
Sorry. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for responding to the questions that we had at the last meeting, and wanted to thank Sarah for the emphasis on the leverage component of this. I think that's an important point. Just a couple quick questions, just so we have the notes, on our record. First, the timing of the promenade and the river trail, is the timing of that to be constructed with the office tower in that first phase?
Still maybe a little TBD. The anticipation is that the office tower is going to go first. There's a lot of construction logistics to think about, which is, again, you've got the spreadsheet guy talking about construction activities, which is a scary dynamic. But where do you put the building materials for all of this while we're building the buildings is going to be a major issue that we need to sort through. And so you don't want to build something and then have to rip it back out for the construction of the next phase. So there's, the envision, I believe, is that, the trail system, everything would be developed as the phases adjacent to them are developed. The promenade, I don't know the answer to of are we going to need that space as lay down space for the second phase after the first phase is constructed. I hesitate to give a gut reaction. My gut reaction is that you're going to need that real estate to put lay steel on the ground.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we're there yet from that phasing standpoint.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, certainly I guess the focus for me would be on how soon the public has the ability to enjoy these spaces. And then I was curious your vision for financing the promenade and Riverwalk, and then maintaining that once it's done.
Yep. So all of the construction activity that is proposed on the site will be financed by the development.
Okay.
So through debt and equity raised by the development. There is a understanding still to be negotiated with the DDA, but conceptual understanding that the DDA will reimburse the costs associated with the public component. That would be not the promenade, which is going to be on private property, but the public trail system that's subject to a city easement. And that maintenance of that is, envisioned that the maintenance of the entire river trail system will be handled by somebody else ultimately. So you have some consistency of it through property to property to property. It's probably more of a DGRI question, but I think the vision here is the new Grand River Network, I believe is the name of the organization that's being kind of created to think about this stuff. Do they take it on in the future? Does the DDA take it on? Does the city take it on? I think the who is still TBD, but the quote unquote public from a maintenance standpoint, I think that's the vision of the whole trail corridor.
And the promenade would have public easement?
There's no public easement on the promenade space, but it'll be, there's not going to be fencing or anything like that. It'll be open to the public but owned privately.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
And then just one question for Sarah or perhaps our attorney, whether the, pros and cons of this, but would it be possible to add reference to the Grand River River for All guidelines, either in the resolution, perhaps? I know a lot of work went into that. Is it possible to refer to that somehow?
Certainly is. If you would like to do that, it's not in the current resolution before you. So if you move to approve this, you would want to amend it to include a reference to those guidelines.
Okay. Well,
Vote on it as amended.
okay. I forget who made our motion, but.
I wonder too if maybe for the sake of simplicity that there's an opportunity to just have our resolution reflect that, it's our understanding that this project will comply with, the zoning and other requirements that are out there, and it's not really dependent on us to enforce that.
Sure, no.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And we struggled with this a little bit because you're seeing it early on in the process, right? And so it's like doesn't feel fully baked. It's not what you're used to, but that is the nature of these projects. So we struggled with how much detail to put in, how many references to things we want to make sure they don't forget. They still need to comply with this, and this. So, but to Jeff's point, at some point, they have to comply with all of those existing standards and guidelines. But if you want to call that one out, and we can add some catch-all language, to make sure that it's clear, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
I guess my only hesitation is just getting back to, the purpose for this board's deliberations and our focus, right? And obviously, we're very closely connected with the planning department and zoning and some of those efforts, but just want to make sure going forward that we're not setting a precedent here that's going to complicate, future projects and again, our deliberations. So I guess, again, look to council to help us simplify that, but.
And again, it's a tricky issue, and this is a really good point, because we talked about this at length. We did try to, in the language in sections 3 and 4, use broad language to just acknowledge that, there's still a lot here to be determined, and agree with you that we're not trying to step on the toes of the planning department or mobile GR, and yet all of those departments will have to be respected in this process. So it's really up to you as a board to decide whether you want to call those out or whether you want to leave it as is.
Maybe we can ask Ms. Turkelson if that would be a part of the review on their part as far as planning and Redevelopment and, sorry, put you on the
Got in the
spot.
hot seat. So, not having the opportunity to discuss this with legal counsel, my initial reaction is that the River for All guidelines are just that. They are not codified in the zoning ordinance. So from a site plan review perspective, when it comes through planning, I will not have the authority to require compliance with the guidelines because, they are just that. So I don't know if Jessica wants to huddle for a minute, but my thoughts are that if there is a desire to adhere to those guidelines, that might be something to consider for inclusion in the conditions if the board feels that that's appropriate or necessary.
And to that point, I guess, and that's a good point, if you look at 4, we tried to add language saying that we would work collaboratively, cooperatively in order to accommodate public concerns. And so those were the types of things that we were talking about, right? They don't really rise to the level of like a legal requirement, but they're a guideline. And we would ask that the developer agree to cooperate with us. So, again, it's tricky, but I also agree, we don't want to sort of wade into the lane of the planning department, right, and other types of jurisdictions. So it's really a judgment call. I think you can do it either way.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate the conversation. I mean, these things are not straightforward, and every project has unique and sort of scale considerations here. So, but again, I think from where I sit, I really want to keep our deliberations as simple and focused as we can on the specific request around recommending approval of the Brownfield plan. And certainly, I think any of us are welcome to participate in other meetings that are happening at the city, to stay in touch with progress on following these guidelines. So, okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, well, again, I very much appreciate the robust and thoughtful conversation with our board. Thank you, Joe, for hearing us at the last meeting and coming back with some follow-up. And Sarah, thanks so much for walking us through a very complicated project. So with that, we have a motion to approve on the table. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. I should also say thank you to city staff. I've got some emails at some really crazy hours of the night from Jess on this project, so they've been carrying a lot of water, so thank you for your support.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is a presentation on the updates to our community master plan.
I was just trying to help. Oh, it's, I don't know where it is.
I need to beg for a minute to put this in because I failed to send it to you.
Let me just take a hot minute to say this is a follow-up to a commission meeting where I believe Director Yasasi was asking some questions about Director Turkelson's presentation on the master plan, which has been quite an endeavor, and I think that we're about wrapping up the public comment, and so wanted to round out the opportunity for this board to have an opportunity to weigh in, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Please excuse the awkward pause while I figure this out.
Kristen, you'll have to open the PDF.
Oh, the PDF?
Yeah, it won't let us use PowerPoint in there.
Oh. Close PowerPoint. And how do I get it big screen? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Joe's the data guy. I'm definitely not numbers, technology, not my forte. All right, so again, thank you very much for this opportunity to provide you with an update on the community master plan. Today is actually the closing date for our public comment period, which is a 63-day window to provide or gather public feedback on the draft plan. So it's a pretty momentous occasion for us in the planning department because we've been working on this for about 4 years now, a little over 4 years. We started with a phased approach that you may recall, and Commissioner, you were part of this, so I'm sorry you're going to have to hear this being redundant. But we did have a community neighborhood connector program that we started with, just city staff. We had paid neighborhood connectors that went out into the community and really did a robust review of the current, or the 2002 Community Master Plan. Really talked a lot about what works and what's not working and what the needs are and where do we go from here. That was really critical. We got great participation despite the fact that we had the global pandemic start about halfway through that process. Our connectors were really creative in terms of how they were still able to manage and meet with their respective neighbors and groups. And so all of that data was really helpful because what it did was inform the request for proposal that we issued. And so what we learned were things like, this will be no surprise, housing is a really critical issue that needs to be talked about again and more through this process. Equity. Equity is not even mentioned in the 2002 master plan, and so yet we know that it's a critical conversation. Safety, everybody wants to feel safe in their community, of course, but how do we integrate safety in terms of the community master plan? Because I think that initially there was some conversation about this will be an opportunity to discuss how GRPD polices our community, and the answer was, well, no, that's a separate. When we talk about safety in the framework of a community master plan, we talk about the built environment. How do we make sure our children are safe when they walk to school? What are the crosswalks? What do the roads look like? Our sidewalks, et cetera. So bringing all of those concerns and comments that we heard through that phase 1 process was really important because we knew that we wanted to focus on those elements as it related to the built environment. So for today, I was going to provide you with an overview, talk about our Planning Commission discussion and process, giving you a high-level review of the plan content, a little bit about the public comment process, and then our next steps. So I always start with this slide because I really think it's important, again, that we level set about what this is, but also what it isn't. I mentioned about safe communities, that we all want to feel safe in our communities, but what does that mean in terms of a land use plan? And so making sure that we are very clear about what this can accomplish, but also what it can't. And I think, you're in a unique position because you probably have some understanding of that relative to your economic development mobility strategic plan, that's an important piece that addresses different needs and desires of our community. And I always look at this like this is a puzzle piece. And the master plan is a really important puzzle piece, if I do say so myself as a planner. It's really important, but it doesn't make up the whole puzzle, right? There's other pieces that have to work together, like the economic development and mobility strategic plan. So how do we make sure that this work complements the other? This is a long-range vision. We look 20 years out when we think about a community master plan. And the reason we do that, and some of the challenge with that, is that it's at a high-level review. So generally, it doesn't get down into the parcel specifics. Now, there's exceptions to that I'll go into with the area-specific plan, but it's intended to be very flexible because we want to make sure that this is nimble enough to, as the economy changes or things happen, hopefully we wouldn't experience another global pandemic, but as we go through life in 20 years, we want this plan to be nimble enough to provide that guidance and that vision, but not so specific or rigid that we can't continue to make changes that make sense for where we are at as a community without going back and updating the plan first. Because the plan is fundamental in terms of setting that vision, and it's required by law in order for us to have a valid zoning ordinance. So that's why that relationship is really important to keep in mind when we think about the level by which a community master plan operates at. Our timeline, I mentioned the pre-planning phase. That was a really robust process for us internally. And then in, I think it was mid-2022, we went out and hired a planning consultant to help do some of the heavy lifting for the city. I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit to my colleagues in the planning department. Leila Islani has been serving as the project manager, a phenomenal talent that we have available. And then Jay Steffen, the assistant planning director, and Sarah Itani, my team has been critical in getting to where we are today. So we had process, and we are at the what I think will be towards the tail end of it in terms of that 63-day comment period that is required by law. And then we will be going to the Planning Commission next week for a public hearing, and then moving towards adoption with City Commission, and I'll be getting into detail at the very end here. So this is what the plan framework looks like, that we have a community vision statement. This was worked hard on by the community. And so what I mean by that is we had some robust community engagement at different varying levels. We had a 50-member steering committee that helped vet this. We tried to do a lot of taking a step back as staff and letting the steering committee really have influence about what this would look like. We have a community connector program where we paid 20 community connectors to be socializing this through various activities that we supported. And so this was ultimately where we landed with the vision statement. I mentioned that through the initial process especially, we heard a lot of important things that our community wanted, and what we now call those things are value threads. We know that equity, safety, vibrancy, culture, and sustainability were terms that kept coming up and mean a little bit different to people, but they kept coming up as really important. And what we decided with our steering committee is that we wanted to make sure that we didn't just dedicate a chapter to equity, but that we embed equity in all of the recommendations or all of the various chapters of this plan. So I think that was a really important distinction for us, to make sure that it may not be every recommendation under housing, for example, has all value threads, but all of these value threads are well represented in each chapter. Chapters, goal areas, those are a bit synonymous for this process. We have 5 goal areas that should look pretty reflective of what we had in 2002. It was kind of one of those things that was working. People were comfortable with it and understood it. So we kept those goal areas or those chapters similar in terminology. Then the plan moves into the objectives and the recommendations, and that's largely where I will focus today. So the first one is great neighborhoods. This is a summary of that recommendation, so I'd have you refer to the plan for the specifics, and of course I didn't bring my plan with me, but specific language that provides a lot more detail about what do we mean by having complete and stable neighborhoods. But overall, the recommendations of that are to provide safe, stable, affordable housing options, the creation and preservation of affordable housing, and making sure that we have robust public involvement for new developments. And so all of these recommendations here are going to guide the work of whether it's through policy development, such as the rewrite of the zoning ordinance or update of the zoning ordinance, as well as what city staff does in terms of our day-to-day operations. We heard a lot about the need for housing and pretty strong support for housing at all types, in all areas, at all price points. So that was something that had evolved quite a bit since we had our 2002 master plan. And so part of that we did expedite through a zoning reform process that we took place in the spring. And so we know that housing was critical. In our request for proposal, we called out the opportunity to maybe advance some of those recommendations a little bit more quickly, because what community was telling us was, we're tired of talking about it, we're tired of waiting, let's do something now, and then we can always make additional adjustments once the master plan is adopted and through a subsequent zoning process. So that was a separate, and I think last time I was here, I talked a little bit more about that, guided by City Commission direction and Planning Commission work. Sustainability was a really important piece. I think that depending on who you speak with, whether sustainability is the right term, but what we wanted to make sure that we're sustainable in our environmental practices as well as our economic practices. And so community was really comfortable with some of these terminologies, and it was important for us to have this plan to be as accessible as possible. I know that those individuals that are deeply involved in the plan maybe prefer terms like climate justice, adaptation, mitigation, but that's not the way our community talks about it. So making sure that we use language that is accessible, but also make sure that we have call-outs or definitions for what do we mean by that. Climate adaptation, mitigation, environmental justice are all included in that, under that umbrella of sustainability. So I mentioned that there was some bold changes, especially around the housing piece, and there was a strong support to allow for small format housing types, such as up to quadplexes by right, or what that would mean is administratively, through this process. Of course, I think the devil will be in the detail about how do we roll this out, and making sure that we have maybe phased approach so that we can see and learn before we make significant changes. But I think that that was a really interesting pivot that we saw with community compared to past housing discussions. And then also not just relying on our traditional neighborhoods to support that density, but really looking to our mid-century or modern areas, which are kind of just on the rings around the core of the city, to also have and allow for greater density. Now, it was up to 4 units, so it's not these large format 200 unit complexes that we're talking about, but those small format allowing greater permissiveness in terms of process. Vital business districts still continued strong support to look at these as our compact centers that provide a mix of uses, making sure that we improve the accessibility or the access within and to districts, especially as we perhaps look at larger parcels being renovated or redeveloped into compact commercial centers, making sure that we replicate things that work, and then looking at enhancing opportunities for local services, amenities, and cultural assets, such as public art, sustainable designs. The proposed bold changes within this chapter are to look at our commercial district in the Heights and being more permissive to make construction more affordable, and recognizing that there's a need to utilize the land that we have because we're not going to gain any more land, and yet we want areas for housing and businesses to be successful, which require people to be in the community and have access to those businesses. Looking at our transportation options and continuing to support alternative ways to get around and through our city. Strong support for the work that's already being done with micromobility and bike lanes, and looking, not pivoting, that's not the right word, but really making sure that we're incorporating more transit demand management practices within our requirements. Strong economy, none of this will probably look surprising to all of you, looking at increasing the density of high-wage jobs, decreasing the wage gap. I think when I searched the word brownfield, the very last bullet on this slide talks about that there's just really continued support for the work that you're doing to utilize the brownfield incentive programs to encourage investment in the city. Bold changes, I think one of the key takeaways for me was that zoning can be very black and white, and what the community is telling us is that we want more flexibility in terms of how we use property, and being a little bit more creative and responsive to how businesses are now operating. I use the example of breweries because it's simple for me, but a brewery is now a restaurant, a manufacturer, a retailer. There's a lot of things that are happening, operational aspects that are happening under one business. And so from a zoning perspective, we used to look at that as 3 separate uses, but now how do we be more nimble and creative in the application of the zoning ordinance to allow good businesses to be successful and thrive and employ residents in our city. Balanced mobility, I touched on this already. More of the same, do more, keep doing what we're doing. That was the key takeaway here. And then also making sure that we're coordinating our transportation and land use practices and utilizing our land efficiently. Bold changes, this is always a difficult one. Through those that participated in the process, there is support to reduce the parking requirements in the city. I think that the implementation of that will be challenging because even though from a zoning perspective we may call traditional business areas, regulate them the same, we know that each business district, depending on where they are located in a city, have different access and different needs and have experienced different experiences in terms of investment. And so I think we might need a bit more of a tailored approach when we implement that. But overall, there was strong support for the city to allow the market to dictate parking and continue to support and encourage the alternative modes of transportation to get through and around the city. And I think that there's a lot of individuals that believe if we keep making it easy to get around in the vehicle, we will keep using the vehicle. And how do we build a transportation system if we're not going to support and make decisions that support that system? Desirable development character, this is kind of where it all comes together in terms of the plan. This is where we have our future land use plan. We identified nodes in the city where we know development pressure is happening, where there are kind of a good network infrastructure already in place relative to transportation, and talk about like where and how that growth happens and what does that look like. And this is the chapter that helps provide that guidance. This is the framework relative to the node system. Each node is treated a little bit differently in terms of what amenities it provides. This here is the future land use map. I would encourage you to go through in each of these to define it. It's too long for me to do that today, to understand what is a downtown, what is a transitional activity center, et cetera. Some of it I think is more intuitive perhaps than others, but Planning Commission did ask for some assistance in terms of helping us see where the changes are. So that's a compare and contrast slide that we'll have available by the Planning Commission public hearing so that we can see what areas are changing. As part of this process, we did select 3 areas to do area-specific plans. Those were selected based on the steering committee's recommendation to the Planning Commission. Creston neighborhood has long been asking for an area-specific plan. We looked at we wanted to do one in each ward. Southtown neighborhoods made a lot of sense, thinking about, we did a business area-specific plan a number of years ago, and then looking at the neighborhoods around it and how do these complement. I will admit there was a strong desire to look at 28th Street as a separate area-specific plan. I concur that that's a project that probably should be looked at, but it's multi-jurisdictional. We've got MDOT, and it's going to be a lot. And so making a decision about what was manageable and what we had capacity to do now was important and influenced the determination that we wanted to focus on the neighborhoods of our southeast side versus the corridor. So future Kristen issue to look at. Butterworth, a really unique neighborhood there along Butterworth Avenue. We've got a really quick mix of different uses that go from, small, quaint retail, institutional, residential, and industrial. So looking at that area and better defining a vision that will guide future planning decisions. So I didn't provide more detail here. I hope that wasn't a calculated mistake on my part, just making sure that I respected your time and knowing that it is available online should you wish. This here is the overall process that we've gone through relative to the adoption process, I should say. Again, we started this in 2019 with the main kickoff in I think it was 2022 of July when we brought the consultant on. The asterisk there is a misnomer. We are past September the 10th. Sorry, I didn't catch that. But through that 63-day window, what we did was kind of bounce back and forth between the Planning Commission. So after the city released the document for that 63-day window, we then went to the Planning Commission and had what we called a deep dive, where we spent 2.5 hours going through the detail and the recommendations, getting some good feedback. We'll be making adjustments based on that. Then we went to City Commission for what we called the high-level briefing, where we give a summary similar to what you just all saw today, but incorporated with some of the Planning Commission comments based on those chapter areas, such as, hey, future land use is looking okay, but we'd really like to see a compare and contrast. So that level was transmitted to the City Commission. So we did that twice, where we bounced back and forth. Ultimately, we are at the October 16th. It's where the yellow star should be moved to. Planning Commission is scheduled to hold a public hearing on October 24th. Ms. Bershey, you'll be pleased to know that that is the only item on the agenda, so we can dedicate time for that process. We'll then be going to City Commission in November. We will be requesting that they set the public hearing on the 12th. At that time, we will provide the community and City Commission with an overview about what the process was that we went through, especially focusing on the engagement strategy, which was robust and critical to get us to this point. Anticipating a public hearing, not anticipating, scheduling a public hearing for the evening of November 19th. Again, my team and I will be prepared to provide a little bit more detail on the content of the plan for the benefit of the residents that wish to speak, to help kind of set the tone and information about what's included. And then anticipated adoption in December, whether that's the 3rd or the 17th, that will be dictated by the decisions of either the Planning Commission and or the City Commission. But that's the timeline that we're looking at. So thank you for this. I hope that was enough detail to satisfy curiosity, but not too much that I took too much of your time this morning. So I'm available for questions if you have any, or I can receive questions, and then if they're too meaty, I can be sure to funnel back the answers through my friends in economic development.
Yeah, just a quick question for me. You mentioned when you were speaking about something along the lines of, if we keep making it easier to get around in the vehicle, people will continue to do that. And I think that was maybe placed in the context of the transit system, I believe. My only question was just maybe a point of clarification. Exactly what do you mean by that? And like, are we trying to make it more difficult for people to get around, or what exactly is that?
No, not more difficult, but just giving more options. It just meant if it's easy to get into the car and it's affordable to have a car, but it's really not, because parking costs money to build, which means that me as a renter has, my lease rate now went up. But if I don't have a viable transportation system, then my choice is going to be the vehicle. And so we want to be really thoughtful in how we design cities. So it's more about not making it difficult, but more about making sure that we're making strategic decisions in our transportation system holistically.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's what I thought.
Yep. Sorry.
Any other questions for Director Turkelson? Well, thank you so much. It's very informative and helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item is other business.
I really appreciate your time. I will try to keep it brief here. I just wanted to mention two more things. We had a member of the public that had to leave, and so there's a handout here that he wanted to make sure you got, so we're going to do that. And then I also wanted to just call some attention to a new staff member that started Monday. So Mackenzie Miller is here and is ultimately filling the position that Jess Solis was promoted back in April from. And so very excited to have more capacity so that Jess doesn't send emails at 2 in.the morning. Mackenzie comes from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, where she too participated on the portfolio that is mostly in front of you, and so has some good expertise that she's bringing from the state, and we're excited to have her. So thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome, Mackenzie. Okay. Our last item is public comment on non-agenda items. Okay, seeing none, I will adjourn this meeting. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.